SSW TimePro is an internal timesheeting application that we use to do our timesheets. I've loaded it up here, so we can quickly add a timesheet. I'll do your timesheets for today, Dan.
Oh, thanks, Harry. That's nice of you.
So, DevOps talk. Integrates with TFS, all of that sort of stuff, so that's pretty cool. Add the timesheet. So this is a product that we've sort of built over the last, 10 plus years. Used to be a Windows app, but essentially the biggest change we had was when we first got onto ALM, so setting up the backlog for our tasks, setting up continuous build so that when we check in code, the server takes the code, builds, make sure it compiles successfully. So that eliminates the works on my machine issues. In 2009, we introduced Scrum, so that improved the communication among the team. Added unit tests, we solved the issue for schema deployments using a SQL deploy, so no longer we need to involve a DBA. The scripts are deployed with the application and the database gets upgraded when the application first loads. 2013, we then started introducing continuous deployment because at this stage we packaged up a file, sent it off to our sysadmin, he'd deploy it onto our servers. So when we introduced Octopus, it was pretty much you check it in, it gets deployed. Then we added usage tracking, app insights, health check to just check the general health of the application. That's sort of more our integration tests. Then late last year, we added Raygun and also started using Slack among the development team. So what I'll show you is not TimePro because TimePro is currently broken, but I'll show you another client project that we're running that's pretty much got the same setup. So what I'll actually do is, this is an email I got from a client just yesterday about his application. So he got a yellow screen of death, okay? And basically I was able to turn that around, whoops, just ignore all these screenshots, checked in and deployed within about an hour or so. Most of this was actually drafting this email, so it was actually a lot quicker. Now, that's pretty quick in terms of a development cycle, getting from development, fixing an issue, and pushing it all the way back up to prod. I was doing this while preparing for this presentation too. So what I'll do is, imagine that this is the source code I've got up here for the application. I'm not going to open Visual Studio, I'm just going to edit it live in the TFS portal. So who knew you could do this? A couple of guys.
I didn't know anyone.
Bad practice, okay? Don't do this. All right, so I'm just going to make a very, very simple change and hopefully I won't break everything. I'm just going to change this dash into a comma.
Oh, come on.
Can you put that to 150 or 125 or something?
The font?
Yes, please.
There we go.
Okay, what did you change?
I was a dash before.
Okay.
Now I was going to change it to comma.
Schema change.
No schema change, Dan. All right, so I'm going to hit check in. And what I've got here is I've got our Slack communication channel. Oh, there you go. You see an event popping in here saying that I've made a check-in. So if there are other people on the team for this project, unfortunately I'm the only guy, lonely solo dev, they can see what's happening with the project. So I've just checked in some code on this window here. Oops.
Have you got the client on that Slack channel?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so eventually we'll see a build being queued up over here on the build window. So we'll do that. And while we're waiting for that, this fourth window down the bottom is our automated deployment tool. So you can see that this client's been regularly getting deployments. So there's 3 deployments that has happened yesterday. Is that yesterday? 8th, yes, yesterday. Okay, going from our internal UAT environment to, our internal test environment hosted at SSW. This environment here is actually hosted on their servers and then the production environment. Okay. All right, still waiting for this build to get queued. It will eventually.
By the way, that message in the blue above there, that's exactly what I was saying before. We built a new scriptable build system.
Just try to hit refresh, sometimes it doesn't show up automatically.
All right, let's refresh. There we go, so the build is queued. So that's building it on our local build server. here at SSW. Once that actually finishes, I'll get another message posted in this Slack window over here saying that the build was complete. And the build roughly takes, I think probably 3 to 5 minutes, depending if there's anything else building on that build server. So while we're waiting, has anyone got any questions for me?
I'd like to see that email you sent.
Oh, you want to see the email?
It'll take 5 minutes.
Let me bring it up. It is continuous.
You need to repeat the question.
You said you thought it was continuous. It is continuous because I've checked in my code and I can pretty much walk away. I will know it will get built and it will get deployed eventually. Okay, so there's no sort of...
He doesn't normally press refresh to check it's all happening.
Yeah.
There's actually a difference between continuous and instant.
Yes.
So if you made a mistake checking in and you wanted to revert,
I can cancel this build right now if I wanted to, but I'm not going to do that.
His other question was, why does it take 5 minutes?
Because this build is set up to basically do a clean build, so it deletes all existing files, sucks everything down from source control again. So there's quite a lot that it needs to actually get. We can actually go in and see what it's actually doing. The actual build itself
Can you make it full screen?
is quick. Scroll down. Oh, there we go. Build succeeded. Shrink that back again. So I've got a new message in my Slack window saying that that build was successful. Took 3 minutes. That's out of my control. Okay, and then eventually over here,
What are you using for a build server?
just TFS build. This one's TFS. So you can see here, our deployment tool has picked up that there was a successful build. It's now going ahead and deploying it into our internal UAT environment. Okay, so there's 2 sites for this solution, the general website and then an internal user management site. So it's going ahead and actually copying the files to those servers, configuring IIS, making sure that on the client's environments, it's setting up the SSL certificates and all of that sort of stuff. Okay, so that's all good. Okay, so this particular one, I have it only automatically deploying it to our internal tests. The client will then sort of come onto our server's test, make sure it's okay. Then he can just click on this button, deploy it to his environment, which I'll do. So his environment's a bit different, the stops and starts IIS websites, so it's slightly more complicated process. But yeah, essentially after we've implemented this, the client loves it because he no longer relies on me to deploy code onto his servers, which normally would be maybe 15-minute, half-hour process. I have to like remote desktop into his machine, copy files up, such and such. All he's got now is this portal. He clicks one button once he's verified that the test, the new code's okay, and it gets deployed. Now, the most awesome story I've got, and I've got a picture of it as well, is that he was on holidays on the snowfield. I had to do a quick bug fix. I said, checked in, please test it. He sends me a picture of him in the snowfield saying, you can click the button this time. All right, so that's going to go ahead and deploy. Once that gets deployed, I'll actually get another message in my Slack portal saying that it's been deployed. Okay. And while that's doing that, I might show you our TimePro project.
Now, obviously, before you had Slack, we used to get these as emails. Why do you prefer it in Slack?
Because emails are sort of spammy. This one, the whole team gets it, and it's up to them whether they want to look at it or not. They don't have to. It's not a task for them to actually go in and delete it. Someone will shout out saying, yes, I'm looking at it. So here's an example of TimePro. So there was a build failure. Chris basically said that, yep, I'm going to look at these issues. It's my responsibility. Okay, so in TimePro, we get all these sort of alerts that when there's a successful deployment, when a deployment fails. Obviously, if it gets too spammy, like it does down here, where we upgraded Visual Studio build to get VNext built, and all our builds started failing. So it's basically become a lot of spam. But ideally, once you get to a point where your team's more mature, you can hide those successful messages and just only show the exceptions, actionable things. All right, so I've got a new message in my channel. Successfully deployed to the UAT environment. Let me bring that up. Okay, so we're now up to UAT, and then once he gets his testers to test on the UAT environment, he can then push a button to push it into prod. Okay, so that's pretty awesome. All I did on my end, besides hitting refresh a few times, was just check in some code. And then I've got code up onto essentially a production environment on the client servers. No need to remote desktop into any machines or anything. Yes, Justin?
In that situation,
Can you hand him the mic?
you deployed a later version.
Just start again.
Yes.
So in this situation, you've deployed a later version.
Yep.
If they accidentally hit the deploy on the older version, it's going to roll it back to that particular version. Will you see that that's the current active version?
Yes, you will.
Okay,
So
so
I
you
can
realise
hit,
that it might be sort of out of sync.
yeah. I can hit, the green ticks are what's the current version. So you can see the production version is 3 versions behind.
Okay.
So there's no push to production for a while.
It's more
But
like just UAT skipped a version, which may happen.
Which may happen, yes. All right, so now that we've got all that deployment sort of stuff happening magically, we can then focus on the metric side of things. So that's stage 3. So in terms of metrics, let me bring up. So for PDS, we're using Raygun to do any sort of exception handling. So you can see that 2 hours ago, there was 2 errors that happened. But what's cool about this is I can track these errors against deployments. So this is the version that I literally deployed 2 minutes ago. I can go into that. Okay, there's no issues yet reported against this deployment. If I go back to, let's go back to, say, this one. There's 2 new issues associated with that particular deployment. So because we have this, we can actually check, we can actually correlate in which build are all our errors being introduced into the system. Okay, this also shows you errors that you've marked as being resolved that are coming back. So that's probably a potential for a unit test to make sure that there's no regression ones, and then there's ongoing issues as well. Okay, so you get this nice crash reporting dashboard. So you can sort of see over time how many errors you're getting, how many have been resolved. You can ignore certain ones that always occurs, like 404s, for example. The other cool thing about Raygun that we've got here is user tracking. There might not actually be any for this one. Let's see. Oh yeah, we've got some. So you can track usage, sort of average sort of load times. So no one's actually using the system at the moment. This is a live active session. But you can drill into users, and you can also correlate to which users are getting which errors as well. So it's pretty nice utility. That's our exception tracking. Let me just get rid of that. Go away. On the App Insights side of things, we don't have App Insights on this client, but this is App Insights for Time Pro. So you can see sort of server time, how many page views, how many requests you're getting. So you get quite a lot of statistics, and there's 2 errors that have occurred. You can click in, drill in, and you can basically see what is causing the errors, which...
Did you use Octopus to deploy on Azure?
That one is to a virtual machine hosted at a data center, but you can use Octopus to deploy to Azure.
We have another demo later set up for release management, so we'll show you how you can do that.
Why not online TFS?
I'm going to show you that later.
Yeah. All these tools are sort of, you can use it with whatever source control system you want. They're pretty flexible. On this client, we actually have New Relic installed, so we can actually monitor any issues. So you can see here, we've got a big spike here, so we can click in, drill in, and see what's going on. What's causing that spike? So there's a HTTP hand. That's probably the actual app spinning up. If I go back to, say, 3 hours, okay, you can track recent alerts. You can see how many active sessions there are. If we go down to this spike here and sort of look at what's going on there, it gives you what URL is being hit. So this particular page is running at 14 seconds. So you can drill in and have a look what's sort of going on there. So these are sort of the metrics that you want in your application. These things, if you're constantly checking them, lets you identify issues before your users start complaining about them. Also gives you a brief overview of sort of what areas of the application that the users are actually using as well. All right. I think I've pretty much covered.
Can I ask, your product owner for
Yes.
that one. How much time does he spend in New Relic versus the other
He
ones?
relies on the email alerts that New Relic gives. So he really only cares if they've got this AppDex score. So he gets an alert whenever the score drops below a certain percentage, which usually mean that there's either lots of errors occurring on the website or there's slow performance happening.
Does he love this? If you took it away from him, do you think it would impact him? Or is it gold plating?
This is probably gold plating, but this has given us a few key pieces of information as well. So through this tool, he's done a server upgrade twice in terms of increasing the amount of RAM, which we saw because there was basically a constant sort of slow performance.
And you
So it
notice
is
the
useful.
improvement.
Yes.
Do you think you get more value out of it, or he gets more
I barely look at this.
Right.
I live mainly in here, where I look at the actual errors. Prior to having Raygun, this is how we checked errors on that site. We used Elmer. Whoops. I think he's cleared the errors. But basically you can see like, it's not very good. It's
a wall of
essentially
text.
just a wall of text. This is a duplicated exception, whereas in the other tool, they've grouped all the exceptions together. So it's pretty nice. And one awesome thing that this actually
But you
gives...
did get the job done using Elmer.
Yeah, we did. It was a
Just
pain
wasn't
though, going through it.
Hmm.
Yeah, so when you get the error details here, you actually get pretty good information about the environment. So you actually see how much memory was available. So you can see if it was actually running out of memory, and that was causing timeouts or whatever as well. So it's pretty cool.
How long did it take you to migrate from
Repeat the question.
So how long did it take me to migrate from Elmer to Raygun? Literally 10 minutes.
Pretty good.
10 minutes. You need an API key from Raygun and probably about 6 lines of code. Well, how much does Raygun cost? Raygun is a paid tool.
It's about $40 a month. I
Yeah,
think.
$40 a month.
Just per instance or
It's for
There's different tiers of plans. It basically determines like how many errors can actually be recorded and retention periods. Yeah.
But we're going to talk about some free ones as well.
Yeah, we'll
But-
talk about free
But obviously he
tracking
likes
tools.
that one for that project.
Yeah.
Yeah, use the mic.
Before, when you're on Slack, you were showing those alerts coming through, and I think Adam, you made a comment. Does the client? Get
Yeah, I
the
wasn't sure if you'd
communication?
invite the client to the Slack group.
So if the client, if
I totally would, Adam, if we get a paid Slack account.
Ah, right. There we go.
so if they were part of that group, would they then, rather than email you, I've got a yellow screen of death,
Yes, I'll pick
they
it up.
could communicate it through there?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
One of the things I like about Slack is that we use our bench resources. So most of the guys are on site, but when they're not on site, they come back here. And so what you don't want them doing is saying, hey guys, what's the latest on the project? You know, you want them to just to go to the Slack channel, quickly look through and then say, all right, I can see what's been happening. There's been a number of problems in the last few days and it seems to be resolved. It looks like I'm going to work on, I don't need to worry about any of that stuff. It's all been resolved, right? You know, that type of stuff, rather than having spiritless conversations.
So would you say that that would replace all email communication?
For some companies, now Damien Brady used to work at SSW, went to Octopus, and I think he'll be calling in soon. He said that the biggest change was moving to Octopus and that they only use Slack, they don't use email. They only use email for an official thing, like a contract or when you're in serious trouble and they want a record of it, you know, that type of stuff. So.
Yeah, so
I'm too old to think like that. I like email, and that's the only thing I don't like about Slack, that there's sometimes messages on Slack which I think should be an email. Yeah. And you've got to find that right balance in your team. Anyone already on Slack? One guy, okay. Right. Did anyone like the look of Slack from that? Anyone not like it? They would not do that? No?
Ask
Okay.
it the other way. Who likes IRC? It was popular in 90s. It's pretty much the same thing.
Oh,
I'll give you an example of why like Slack is a really cool, I guess, visibility tool. So I work on PwC for probably 75% of the month, and on PDS for the remaining 25. And they've got their own developers in Malaysia that do work, and they don't always communicate with me because it's their own little team. But through this, I can actually see what they've been doing. So this is one of the Malaysians checking in some code yesterday. So that's the comment from the check-in, and I can go into the change set.
Is it to marry Slack with online TFS without
Yeah,
tools?
Slack's. So is it easy to integrate Slack with online TFS and all these other tools? Yes. Slack has a whole bunch of APIs and a whole bunch of pre-canned sort of integrations that you can just add to your subscription. On the free tier, you get 5 integrations, and then when you get paid, you get, I think, unlimited. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So we're using it for all sorts of things.
So could you just show those integrations? Because that's the main, like,
Yeah, sure.
I'm sure Daniel was facetious and says just IRC, but IRC didn't have the ability to add these.
You would be surprised how much you could do with IRC in the early days. You know, all those bots and worse that we had over IRC. It was
All right,
incredible.
so could you make an integration to
So
TFS Online?
This is a list of all the stuff that Slack can integrate to. So there's bots where you can sort of program commands. So for example, Damien at Octopus, and you can probably ask him about this when he gets on the call, they do the deployments of Octopus when they release a new version through Slack.
They do what?
They deploy a new version through Slack.
Some people are calling these chat ops.
Yeah, chat ops.
So pretty much you do everything through the chat and you trigger the deployment.
That's next week's talk.
It's a bit insane.
So they go to Slack and they type a command to deploy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, so there's a
Back
whole
to
bunch of
the email,
integrations.
right?
I'll quickly show you the integrations that we've got at Assist.
I want to be able to send a command through my email to
Yeah.
deploy.
Yeah, so we've got Visual Studio Team Services integration. So there's 2 ways you can integrate with Slack, through these sort of official integration channels. So this one is via TFS Online. They've got their own app, but this is an on-premise TFS. For on-premise TFS, you've got service hooks that you can hook into. So Slack provides an API, so I've manually configured this hook to post to the channel. So each channel gets its own little API URL. So you can write your own custom things that post messages to Slack as well.
And can you just explain the service hooks just for people who don't understand? Because it's pretty important.
Yeah, sure. So let me go back to here. So I'll show you what the URL of a service hook looks like.
So when people ask you, can you make TFS integrate with something else? This is kind of your key to the answer.
Okay, so they've got like 3 different service hooks for 3 different channels. So I go to that PDS one. So basically it generates this URL with a unique token. You copy this URL and basically you send some JSON that determines how to format the message. And in TFS, you go into service hooks, I'll hit add. So TFS has a whole bunch that it can integrate with. Hit next.
Just go back.
Oops.
In that video we watched, they were talking about Jenkins as the build server, so that would be that one.
Yep.
We're talking about Slack right now, but another thing that other companies use is something called HipChat. Just click HipChat. Yeah. So so there's lots and lots of alternatives, and that's why I said there's a minefield of tools here.
You just got to find what works best with your organization. All right, so I go into Slack. So there's a whole bunch of events that I can hook into. So when code is checked in, or when the work item's been updated, so like move from to do to in progress, that sort of stuff. So I can hook into all of that. You can do some filtering, but then that's the key bit here. You put in that URL. Hit finish. And then if I go into my Slack, oh, sorry, I should hit test to test that it works. Test. So it's going to post this message as a dummy message into Slack. Okay, so you get that So pretty nice and easy. So I guess the goal of this is your sort of central dashboard to your application. You should have bugs feeding into here, you should have check-ins feeding into here and deployments feeding into here. So if at any point you want to know what happened, I won't do this one, but if you want to know what happened a few days ago, you can just scroll up. So yesterday on TimePro, Chris created a build, it failed the deployment to staging environment, and then eventually probably got fixed and we had a successful deployment. So it's also like that time of, like that snapshot reference as well that you can go back to. All right.
I have a question. You know how you said you like to see what the Malaysians are doing via Slack?
Yep.
Can you go to TFS? Because obviously you could see the same thing by looking at
Sure.
the check-ins in TFS. I'm trying to understand why you like to go to Slack to see the same information.
I kind of agree with Eric because Slack is a hub of
It's a hub.
information. You can
Like
get
I just need to
everything.
check this one thing rather than going to 3 different sites.
So he would have to check Octopus deploy, he would have to check.
So yeah, this gives me a
commits and all this
high-level
thing.
overview of what's happening with my project.
Right.
And then if I need to drill in, then I can go to those individual services. All right, so that's the check-in history. It's not as nice, is it?
Nice. No.
So I have to hit expand here to see all the comments. Compared to that, it's all there nicely formatted.
Any other questions for Eric?
Yep.
Take the mic.
Have you guys had any experience deploying? Because I know this works fine with .NET technologies, but if I have a project which is only JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, would it work the same way if I wanted to use Octopus deploy to push my JavaScript to a server?
Yeah, absolutely. Octopus deploy is like, it doesn't care what your code base is. You just need to tell it the server and how do you configure it, and then it'll deploy to it. Whether it needs to set up IIS or whether you run some scripts to configure Apache. Yeah.
I might just expand upon that a tiny bit. Octopus Deploy has required that you give it a package. Okay, can you get package? In the very latest version in the last month, they have allowed you to use other formats. That's always been the baseline. You've got to give it a package for it to deploy, which kind of made it very Microsoft orientated, obviously. You had to be essentially a Visual Studio developer to use it. They have allowed you now to give it a zip file or other packages, and the primary reason for that is ASP.NET MVC5. That ASP.NET 5 will run on Linux and other things like that, so they needed to expand that out so it will run anything.